Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Boys in Motion podcast. We're your hosts, Andrew, Brian, and Tyler, and our goal is to bring you practical tips to help you up your game in endurance sports. And we're focusing today on running form. I'm going to highlight some tips to make you run smarter and healthier.
Perfect. Looking forward to it. And before we dive right in, we just want to remind you to follow us on all our socials. We're on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. So subscribe, follow, so you never miss an episode. We've got tons of great content coming your way, from training tips to wild hot takes. We don't want you to miss out.
That's right. Today's episode is all about optimizing your running form, boosting your efficiency, be faster, and run longer. Let's get this started. What are we going into today?
Yeah, so pretty recently I got a running gait analysis after getting some mild shin splints training for the Ottawa Marathon, and this wasn't my first go around with shin splints, so I decided to invest into doing a running gait analysis with the physical therapist that I was already seeing who offered this service. So, just for those that are not familiar with what this gait analysis is, it involves running on a treadmill while being recorded from various angles, from the side, the back, the front, and they'll record it and slow it right down so that the physical therapist or expert that's analyzing you can look at your biomechanics and identify any inefficiencies and potential causes for injury in your gait, and also ways to improve and be more efficient so that you can use less energy and be faster. So from the running analysis feedback that I received, I was able to make some small but significant adjustments in my form that are hopefully going to help my running efficiency and, fingers crossed, reduce my risk of injury. So I'm hoping that this build, the Toronto Marathon, will be shin splint free. So knock on wood on that one. And just one last shout out to the running physio in Toronto and my physical therapist, Kevin C. It's just an absolute great investment to do a running analysis, in my opinion, and finding a physical therapist before you get the injury. So I would definitely recommend it, and well worth your well-earned dollars.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Like, having a physiotherapist that you trust, that knows their stuff, and if you're really passionate about sports and you practice and you train a lot, having somebody who can help support your body, make sure you're achieving your goals healthy, happy, without pain, is more important than everything else. I think it's smart that any athlete has a physiotherapist and potentially some other experts in their corner that can help them.
And I think too that people think they have to go to a physio if they're injured, but you could go to physio prevention, prehab, and really just get your form better and get stronger in those little aspects that sometimes you just overlook and can lead to injury later on. So I find it important to keep up with those things.
Yeah, and one last point on this. I encourage you, if you are working and your employer provides you with a benefits plan, look through the details of that benefits plan, because sometimes there can be coverage through your employer to actually save some money and get that professional support that you should be seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. My benefits, so running gait analysis is a part of physiotherapy benefit. Also, run coaching is a part of the same thing. So check your benefits and also check the physical therapist that you go to, because a lot of times they'll lump it into categories to make it work with those major providers. But yeah, let's jump right in. So we're just going to go over 4 efficiency tips are generally analyzed during these running gait analysis, and just kind of go over the main tips and certain cues to help you improve certain aspects of your running. And the first being posture. A large part, and one of the main things that I think a lot is wrong with a lot of people's running gait is their posture. You'll see some people that are more slumped down, bending at the waist. One big cue for good running posture is to run tall. You want to have your chest out, run and extend your torso very tall and proud, I think is like one of the main cues for that. And you want to keep your core engaged and your torso stable as you're running. I mentioned the folding down like a lawn chair. Some people think that that is the cue when you say run tall and proud with your chest out. They'll like lean forward at the waist, but it's really a whole forward lean from your ankles and not the waist. Really engaged and ready to go fast.
Yeah, something that really helped me when I was working and analyzing my gait was having the tip of actually somebody pulling you with a string forward. So you're almost, yes, you have that momentum forward, but you're being pulled up as well. And so it helps you be light on your feet and have that good posture.
Yeah, you gave me that cue and we would run together, and it's just like night and day. It's just like I feel like I'm Pinocchio just on a string.
I love it. That's perfect. So another tip for efficiency that we have here is foot strike. So really what you want to aim for, and this is something that various runners will have very different types of foot striking, and it really just depends person to person. But what an efficient runner should aim for is a midfoot or a forefoot strike rather than a heel strike. And what you can kind of think of that is if you're looking at your hand and you pound it into your other hand right near your wrist bone, that's a very, very sudden impact, and that can have repercussions all the way up your body and lead to some pretty significant issues. So an efficient runner will aim more so to land on their midsole, so their midfoot or their forefoot.
Yeah, and as landing on your midfoot or forefoot, we are focusing on endurance running. So not necessarily on your, you'll see a lot of sprinters on there, then they'll keep their calves extremely engaged. That's not necessarily what we want. We want forefoot, midfoot, and a slight touch of your heel onto the ground with every stride, just to let your calf not be engaged the entire time, because that can be painful for a long event. But that midfoot to forefoot strike, what that ends up doing is it allows you to land your foot directly underneath your body, where you have that leg stiffness to roll right into the next stride. So that puts you in a good position for that.
By far, my favorite subject. I have a question. What are the best tips for picking footwear that's right for you?
I think one thing that when you go to that back view in the running gait analysis, they will really look to see what your feet are doing as you are hitting the pavement or hitting the treadmill in this case every single stride. So they want to see what your pronation is like. And we naturally have a slight pronation of our foot. Generally, you will hit the ground with the outside of your foot and roll in slightly. But one thing that a lot of people have is overpronation. So that's when if your hand is flat, you hit on the outside and it rolls in and it collapses towards the inside of your stride. That is what they call overpronation. So I think this is the deciding factor between do I want a neutral running shoe or a stability running shoe. Personally, I found that I don't overpronate and I'm pretty stable in my foot strike, but do either of you have any experience with stability shoes?
Not so much with stability shoes, but I have a very low arch. And so when I first began running, some of the shoes that I was looking at were very, very narrow. And that actually increased my pronation because I had more weight that was just kind of being dropped through the arch where there was no support from the sole. And that caused overpronation because my feet weren't actually stable on the soles. And so making sure that I bought wide enough shoes helped me in that regard. But another thing is with more mileage, you start to strengthen your feet. And so as I've grown into the sport of running, I aim for less and less kind of cushioning all the time. And I prefer more so to strengthen my feet. And what that means is essentially going away from some of that stability seeking towards a more neutral shoe as I continue to build some strength in my feet. And also when I'm not running, I'm now looking at kind of zero drop barefoot type of shoes just to continue to strengthen my feet.
The Tivas help with that probably too, right?
Oh yeah, big time. I love the Tivas and even experimenting with some runs in the Tivas. It's interesting.
Oh, we have some footage. We actually have some footage we could pop up off of Tivas running
Yeah.
with the boys. For me, it's for sure also wide. Just the geometry of the foot is just, I think I'm wide as well, so I just make sure that the shoe's wide. Depends, those wide boys out there, they like them wide. So it also depends on the speed, I think, too, that you're running at. You don't really want to go something very reactive to I guess going faster, and more so stable if you're going for slow, longer mileage. You also don't want to injure yourself if you're not strong enough yet. If your feet and small leg muscles aren't that tuned up yet for your major races. I think that stable shoe is also a good option for those people who need that.
Yeah, for sure. Even if you don't overpronate, you can still definitely utilize stable shoes. Just in general, stable shoes are going to be heavier since they have those guide rails and kind of extra built up midsole. So yeah, it's not a racy shoe, but it could be a good option to just throw into your rotation. I do enjoy having a wide variety of types of shoes in my rotation. As road runners, we're just hitting the pavement and it's kind of the same over and over. So we don't get that nice variety like trail runners do. So we can kind of simulate that with different types of shoes. I'm a big fan of having a variety of drops, weights, maybe a stability shoe, just to kind of get my feet used to different things and change it up every day.
Yeah, and with any rotation of shoes is also keeping track of the mileage that you have on all of your footwear, because some shoes, especially race shoes, do have some limits in the amount of mileage they can do. And so a good rule of thumb generally is to carry about 300 to 500 miles or 500 to 800 kilometers in a shoe before you start to really think about whether or not that shoe has run its course, because the foam, the cushioning, the stability is only meant for a certain lifespan and distance on every shoe. It varies a lot, so you kind of need to make a judgment call at a certain point, but keeping track of the amount of mileage is definitely a good tip to having healthy shoes and healthy feet. What do you use to track the mileage that you have on your equipment?
I'm obsessed with Strava. Number one reason to buy new shoes, to add it on Strava. I you Every time you go on a run on a different, let's say, pair of shoes, you just boom, edit activity, tap on the different pair of shoes, and then once you go in your profile, you could see how many kilometers or miles you have on each shoe. You could even retire shoes, which is awesome. You give them a little retirement party, you bring them out for a last hooray, and then you put them in the back of the closet till a rainy day or something like that. But it's a good method to use. You could also use on the Garmin, and probably Andrew, your watch have a different type of app as well that probably tracks the shoe mileage on your watch as well, so that there's a lot of different options.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's nice too. You can set notifications. So you can be like every 500 kilometers, send me an email and it'll say maybe time to retire it. Because that's generally, that 500 to 800 kilometers is normally when those midsoles are pretty beat. So on to the next thing that physical therapists will be looking at during these gait analysis is cadence. And I think across this group here, we kind of have a bit of a range of our cadence, some a little slower to maybe a little above what is considered ideal. But generally, I would say an ideal cadence is in that 170 to 180 steps per minute.
So, Andrew, you mentioned that we have a wide variety of cadences in this group. What I'm curious about is, if you could kind of rank us on optimal cadence and what you've noticed in going out on runs with us.
If I'm putting us on a podium, Tyler gets that bronze again. He's nice and slow and steady does it. And then Brian's right there in the middle. I would say Brian is more in the 170 or 180. And then I find I'm higher. And even when I did my analysis, I was like 190, probably 195 when I'm racing. So it's higher, but it's all just personal. And even like, yeah, I'm saying 170, 180 here, but might be ideal as well.
So you got the road runner status. You just got the legs, just keeps going.
Mhm. Absolutely, yeah. But I think the important thing here is that some runners tend to overstride and have this really long stride where, as I mentioned earlier, you should aim to strike the ground directly under your body so that your shin is vertical. So if your cadence is super low, likely it's because you are overstriding, potentially heel striking, which if we just shorten that stride, it will naturally increase your cadence. And that will greatly improve your efficiency and also reduce the risk of injury. So I think that's kind of like the important takeaway, other than the shots that I'm firing at everyone.
I'll try that on my next run. Jeez Louise.
I think when we talk about cadence, and you gave me this tip of actually training for a certain cadence zone, because I was just going out and being a drone on certain runs, not even thinking about cadence. During a lot of zone two workouts and that sort of thing, I'll actually do a block of a run where I'm focused on cadence, and it's always on increasing my cadence because I'll check my watch afterwards, and if I don't have any focus on cadence, I might be at like the 165, 170. But if I do think about my cadence, I'm a little bit more in the middle of the range that you defined, and it feels better. Generally, I can get a faster pace without increasing the, let's say, strain on my body, which means I'm being more efficient at a slightly higher cadence. So you can play around with that without, necessarily going to a physio to get a test done, and playing around with your cadence, you might feel better in a certain zone. But that being said, looking at like ultra marathon runners, sometimes their cadence is very low and they'll do more of a shuffle where they are heel striking a bit. And that's just because they're doing these mega long efforts where a shuffle ends up being more efficient than taking 170, 180 steps per minute. So it also depends on the event you're training for and how you compete.
Frig, that's my excuse. You're right, Andrew. I just looked at my last run, 165, baby.
I just looked at it like 5 minutes ago and I was like, oh, this is nice. Perfect. But just to give some practical advice on both the foot strike and this cadence, I was listening to a podcast where physical therapist Dr. Matthew Silver was on, and he, in his new book, Built to Run, he gives two nice tests to kind of put this, like, materialize this information. And first is the jumping test, where running is just single leg jumps one after another. So if you just start jumping in place on a hard ground, take off your shoes just so you can feel the ground, because that's important for the next step. So yeah, ground
Right.
yourself.
You got to get those dogs out.
Oh, you got to get them dogs out. Very important. Step one, dogs out. Step two, start hopping. And you want to try to find a nice hopping pace that feels comfortable, that you can do easily for 1 minute, and find that pace. Just bounce up and down, bounce up and down. And that is generally your natural good running cadence. And then try to slow it right down. And you'll find that it ends up feeling way harder. And then speed it way up, and kind of the same thing. Then you're just gassing yourself. So that's kind of a good thing. And then you have that, remember that feeling as you're running. And then you can kind of put the two and two together. And then the next step of that is for the heel strikers in the room. I don't think there's any in this actual room. But as you're hopping, instead of hopping on your midfoot or forefoot, switch and start heel striking and feel that sensation on your bare feet. It's not super nice. Modern shoes protect us from that, but that, just kind of try to think of like your ankle in that moment. Remember when you're running that that's not really what we want.
No, that's fantastic, and some easy, takeaways with those tests. Hopefully, some people really benefit from those. So the fourth and final efficiency tip that we have that a physio will analyze when it comes to gait analysis is your arm swing. So actually what's happening in your upper body. So this is talking about the angle that you'll hold your arms at the elbow. So typically a 90-degree angle is suggested. Now this can vary. The most recent winner of the Boston Marathon had hands that were essentially as acute as possible. But then you want to be really focusing on swinging them forward and back rather than having your fists cross across the midline of your body. So your right hand coming across to the left of your body and vice versa. That's something to be avoided. A very efficient runner will more so have that in a single plane front to back.
Yeah, that's something I don't struggle with the arm swing, but I find my back gets very tight after like 2 hour efforts or longer. The back scapula area just gets real tight, and maybe it has to do with my arm swing. I'll have to look into it.
Another thing that I have struggled with in the past, I've since made changes, was with tightness, and that I used to run with my shoulder blades kind of raised and slightly flexed, and then just, yeah, really trying to run loose, neck, your shoulders, just everything loose, and your arms just moving freely. You don't want to hold tension in that upper body, especially over long efforts. You will feel it. One specific memory I have from doing a time trial during COVID is right as I finished the time trial, the marathon time trial, my legs felt great, but my arms were just completely locked, and I couldn't even lift my arms above my head because I was just holding so much tension the whole time.
Just because the man was stressed.
Oh yeah, big stress.
Yeah, and that's a good tip and takeaway as well, is when you're running, although it might not be the most efficient thing to do when it comes to just keeping a standard gait, is to shake out your arms every so often, to move your shoulders, just kind of, yeah, get a little bit flexible every so often. You can kind of judge this on your own. In the marathon, I was doing kind of every 5K, I would shake out my arms, get some blood in them, move them a little bit so that I didn't have so much built up tension and I moved the upper body just a little bit of relaxation. I found that helped a lot in avoiding, you know, just continuous same movement through such a long effort. And I still do that in workouts today. If I'm out there for more than an hour, I'm putting a concerted effort into stretching out a little bit during a run and shaking my arms out.
Big agree. I do the nice little windmills every so often as well. It helps out.
So that covers the 4 efficiency tips. We went over posture, foot strike. We also covered footwear as a part of foot strike. And then we looked at cadence and arm swing. Optimizing all of those will help you become a more efficient runner.
Yeah, so we gave you lots of information to digest for your own running form. But if it's all just a little bit too much and you're still a little confused of what exactly does that look like, I think the best place to go is to just look at the pros. And I can think of no one better than the marathon goat, Eliud Kipchoge, and just pull up a YouTube video of him. And he is basically everything that we were describing to a T. His form is so nice, so fluid. He's great to watch. Just to kind of give you some highlights of that as you're watching it. If you look at his foot strike, he lands right on the balls of his feet, light midfoot strike, is on the pavement for a really short time, and his ankle is right under his flexing knee, and then immediately rolls into that next stride, being super efficient, still engaged, and then puts all of that power in a nice heel kick back into another stride. His stride length, his shin is completely vertical and even maybe slightly behind his hips. And if you analyze his cadence, he's about at 180 to avoid overstriding. And you'll see at those speeds, sometimes people around him, you'll notice some other overstriders, but him, it's really right under him, and he's just pushing off for that next stride. And then if we look at his upper body when he's running, he has a tiny rotation of his torso as he's running that's in line with his strides. His arms come up right about around to his chest. He looks very relaxed, but his arms don't cross the midline, and his arms are pretty close to 290 degrees. So yeah, do take a look there because he is peak form, absolute peak form.
He is quite the specimen.
Yeah, it's really poetry in motion to see somebody at the pinnacle of the sport run with such great form. But it really depends because many other professionals at the top end of the sport run very, very differently. A great example is Lionel Sanders, the triathlete. He almost looks like he's limping when he runs. He's got this very kind of wobble head, and it's not quite as smooth as you see from Elliot.
Because of his sport, I think. Coming from doing triathlons, I kind of know why he doesn't kick. It's just a whole different type of stride. But yeah, in his training too, he is kind of wonky, which is kind of awesome because he's so fast, but he's a wonky boy. They're just
That's funny.
they're pounding the legs on the bike. It's just like you kind of don't want to pop anything, so he just keeps it up. It's nice. I like it.
Yeah, and speaking of other marathoners, one recent one is Connor Mance, who ran in the US Olympic trials and is about to run in the US Olympics as the top male. And I mean, he's a 207 marathoner, so he's very quick. But watching him, his stride is very, very bouncy, where Elliot is like, it's very moving forward, where Connor Mance is a lot more vertical oscillation, and he's a lot more upright in his stride. There's also Meb Keflezighi, which is he's a heel striker. If you watch him, he lands over strides and then on his heel. So there's another example of a crazy fast guy that is heel striking, a little bit of overstriding. And then another one, and Brian had mentioned this earlier with ultra runners, looking at Camille Herron, who has broken a ton of records and is a crazy ultra runner. She can basically run forever. But watching her, she does more of a shuffle and her stride is not fluid whatsoever. And we were speaking of arm swing. She has this crazy arm swing where this crazy over exaggerated arm swing where her arms are going way up and kind of side to side. So I think basically the gist of it is it depends and everyone is unique. And that's why seeking professional help with something like this is super important.
Yeah, and one other thing is if you are somebody who overpronates and you think that is kind of to your detriment as a runner and you may not be able to run because of your overpronation, that's not the case. There are professional marathon runners that have a serious overpronation. It's essentially like their knees, their feet are all falling inwards towards their arches, and they can still put up blistering fast times, train 100-mile weeks, and be at the pinnacle of the sport. Of course, you might have some challenges as you start up because your feet might be a little bit weaker and you'll need to put a concerted effort into strengthening because you're overpronating, but that is not at all the end of the sport for you. It really just means you're going to need to strengthen and focus more on your running.
Yeah, that's a good point. To bounce off of that note too, I think that strengthening is a big thing, but also if you have been strengthening and you are doing all the nice things and nothing is hurting, don't fix it if it ain't broke.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, one good practical tip, this time I actually went and got this gait analysis, but with a previous physical therapist I was seeing, I actually was just chatting with him. I was dealing with some other issues and I was just like, can I bring videos in so you can kind of take a look and we can chat about things and maybe see why this might be happening. So just a good tip is just film yourself running from different views. So from a side view, a rear view, and a front view. And that's a good way to bring that into your physical therapist so that they can see it. Just some tips. You kind of want it around your waist and just at a nice top end of zone 2 pace with just your everyday trainer and at 60 frames per second so that you can slow it right on down.
So Andrew, are you going to toss around some of these rear view running videos you have? I'd like to slow that 60 FPS down.
Oh, I mean, I might release some. We'll see.
And can we zoom in too?
Oh, you can zoom in, all right. I know, Tyler, you'd like that.
Oh yeah. Well, this is something even Tyler, when we were up in Ottawa training for the Ottawa Marathon, we talked about. Never actually did, but we did talk about filming each other run so we could at least kind of see our form and start to critique it. So even with a friend, although
Maybe
you
this
might not,
weekend.
maybe this weekend, although you might not be professionals, it's worthwhile to film yourself so you at least know what you look like when you run, and you might see there's like a glaring difference between you and some of the professionals that you can quickly fix.
Yeah, and just if you are making any changes, you look at videos of yourself and you're thinking of making changes, do everything very slowly and in small increments, because if you do anything too extreme, it's very likely you can injure yourself just in a different way because your muscles just aren't quite used to it. So low and slow is the way, just like the way I ramped up my volume for this marathon block.
Yeah, 0 to 100 real quick. This was very, very interesting. I know I learned a lot. I'm glad that you walked us through some of your findings from the gait analysis that you did. Does your physio recommend that you add anything to your routine? I know when I went to my physiotherapist, there were targeted exercise that I built around the habits of my training routine. Was there anything that maybe is a little bit more general that you could share with runners?
I can definitely share some exercises. I have some strengthening exercises, a lot of single leg exercises, and then I have a bit of an emphasis on my shins just because I'm a weak shin boy. So there's definitely a heavy emphasis on that. And then I'm also starting to do some plyometrics for just strengthening those tendons, doing that for warm ups, getting some nice jumping exercises and stuff like that at the beginning. But I can definitely share some more information or even just like a sheet that I have of the names and all that because I know if I try to list that off, I'll butcher it right now.
Yeah, fair enough. And even just incorporating some simple warm-up drills before you go for a run can really assist with being a more efficient runner. So stuff like high knees, butt kicks, A skips to your routine before you go out on a run. And then if you like some light stretching after your run, I was suggested a few just based off some nerve pain that I was feeling, but that can be very personal as well as to what feels good. And of course, listening to your body is an important tip as well.
Don't sleep on yoga.
That's true. Yoga was a huge help in my last block. So I think we've covered a lot of the main points. I think we should move over to chat time. And I heard some really interesting news that Andrew might have a hot take this week.
Breaking news.
I do have a hot take that is on topic for this episode running recovery gear. There's a lot of buzz, things like Normatec boots, fancy massage guns, fancy vibrating foam rollers. My hot take is that if you have some dollars to spend, that is not where you should spend them first. I think if you want to make an investment in recovery, going to a physical therapist, if you have the means, is the best bang for buck because us runners, we're short on time, and physical therapists can give you the smallest amount of things to be efficient with your recovery with simple gear. Just keep it simple. Some bands, a nice simple foam roller. So that is my hot take. If you want to put on your boots, you can put them on.
I'll pop a picture up. I got, I got a picture with the Normatec boots on. I'm telling you, those are life changing. I don't know if I agree with your hot take this week.
That's fine. I'm not saying they're not great tools. I'm just saying the biggest bang for buck, I think, is seeking professional help.
I do like that though. That does make sense.
Yeah, I 100% support this hot take. One of the worst parts about leaving Ottawa was the fact that I couldn't bring my physiotherapist with me because, you forge a relationship, they understand your body, you're addressing problems together, and once you have that history with your physiotherapist, if they understand the sport that you're practicing and the biomechanics behind that sport, they can give you such targeted advice that you're simply not ever going to address with a massage gun and a hot compress, right? So 100% that hot take was spicy, but I love it. I love a
I
little spice.
I do agree with the ending, and I find that physio or even massage therapy or athletic therapist, it gives you a like you are forced to schedule that time with them, and it just forces you to take that time to either recover, stretch, or strengthen instead of, oh yeah, I'm gonna foam roll, I'm gonna stretch at home, which nobody ever does.
Oh, Tyler, how's your history with listening to your physical therapist? I heard it's a little dicey.
No comment. Prefer not to answer.
Oh my God. So for context, right before the marathon, and we've talked about this before in the pod, so I'll be very short. Tyler, what was it? 8 days out from the marathon, you sprain your ankle. Physiotherapist the next day says you shouldn't be running, don't be racing. That's crazy. And then the next time you see him, boom, you've completed a marathon. It was really freaky.
Oh, it was nice. Still to this day they talk about that. So I think I'm a legend in that type of office. They're like, this guy's a crackhead, doesn't listen to anything we say, but he keeps coming back. So
But you know what? It is true. Like they did say to you that your recovery was, hands down some of the best recovery that they've ever seen. The fact that you could go out. And I think part of that is due to the fact that you literally didn't run in the like 10 days leading up to your marathon.
Yeah, that so I kind of half listened. I did not run for 8 days, and then I did a nice little check in with the body, felt fine, and then boom, there we go. And then no repercussions, which is I'm grateful for, but I think it does speak to the type of recovery I was doing with cross training and stuff like that too.
Yeah. No, I think that is an important caveat to how valuable consulting a professional like a physiotherapist is. You actually need to invest time outside of the physiotherapist's office in recovering. So like actually building it into a habit to do those strengthening exercises, to do those stretches, to do that recovery work, or else you're not going to get that much out of it. But if you're somebody who is in the regiment of running and you're going out 3 to 5 to 7 times a week running, you have the willpower to follow your physiotherapist's plan. And if you don't, well, that sucks for you because you're really missing out on, recovering properly.
I think before we get too much deeper into chat time, I will just reveal the plan that I got post gait analysis. So the biggest thing that I learned was that I am quite an upright runner, although my foot strike is pretty good and that I'm below, like vertical and below my body, is that my torso is quite upright. So the plan was for forward lean, and that was kind of the string and tall and proud kind of chest out. And what I did was week one, 1 minute on, four off. Week two, 2 minutes on, three off, to kind of think of that cue, just run. Think of that cue, just run. And then I have in 2 weeks, I have a follow up with analysis to see if it's kind of stuck and kind of become more natural where I'm not thinking about it too much.
That's interesting. And how are you like cueing yourself to think about that?
I'm just doing like just looking at the time. So not necessarily exact or anything, but I'll do about a minute off. And then sometimes the on will end up being longer because I kind of am just comfortable and I'm pretty okay with that. It's more the off that I try to keep contained to just those short bits where I'm not thinking about it.
Yeah. Speaking about Gates, I've noticed something about Tyler when I see him running in the distance is he's got this like windmill arm. So like one arm is great on like a vertical plane, and then the other arm is kind of like stirring up the pot, which I thought was quite funny because I was cycling and I saw you running one time, and I knew from a mile away that that's you because you were stirring up the pot with your left or right hand. I forget.
I think it's the right. Yeah, I got that little swing in the right, and it's actually funny. I do the same thing with the swim. I have some sort of rotation difference with the right arm on the swim. Maybe it's my shoulder. I don't know, but it's real efficient. Or maybe I'm just trying to be like Lionel.
You
That's
do
it.
kind of look like Lionel a little bit with that arm. He does kind of have a little something there.
Yeah,
All
the
I need is the
mustache.
blonde hair.
That's it. The mustache helps too, but it's true. You kind of have that triathlon swagger.
That's what they're calling it these days.
It's the swagger. I'm telling you. Makes me go faster too, obviously.
So we're kind of all now into a training plan. How is the body feeling?
My calves have never felt so good. I'm actually very confused. Week, well, what, 4 days off of a race, and the calves feel nice. They're not tight. They are fresh and ready to rumble. I'm pretty excited.
Are
It,
you actually doing that much volume of running, or is it mostly kind of?
that's the thing. It's not too much volume running, so it's nice and easy on the legs. So, but it is intense. The triple sport, so that's what makes it intense, but very minimal running, which I love. I mean, hey,
Hey,
I want
what?
you to finish that thought.
Yeah, you got to finish that thought. Keep going.
the thing I do love about triathlon training is that I could lower the mileage on the running, but I just keep cycling, so it's nice and it keeps my volume up, but it pounds the legs less. I guess it doesn't pound the legs as much, so it's easier on the body. And I don't know, cycling is pretty fun. I like it. It's basically a free buffet every time you go out.
Very nice. And Andrew, so you're running the Toronto Waterfront Marathon in the fall. what
So am
training
I.
plan are you? But your training plan is an Ironman training plan that you're doing for the marathon.
On how that's gonna work, but yeah, Andrew, let's hear an actual training plan.
Yo, what are you doing?
Yeah, so I'm doing Fit Singer again, but I'm doing the 12 week. Just some early summer busyness, so I'm late to the game doing the 12 week, hopefully rolling some of that fitness from the Ottawa block into this block. So that kicked off this week. So I went from minimal mileage to about, I don't know, 85, 90 kilometers last week. And now it's just rolling right into it this week. So it's going pretty good.
It's gonna start getting spooky on your Strava, that's for sure. We're gonna need a warning when we open the app.
Yeah, lots of people were asking me and others if I was still alive or fine because they weren't seeing me on Strava. So I am alive and well. I'm here.
I think we had one of the best comment exchanges on your last post, though. I kind of love that. The comments on your 8 miles.
Oh, right, because Andrew posted like GA8M something something. And I knew GA was general aerobic, but I didn't know what the 8M standard for because I'm in metric on Strava, so it's a 13K run. And so I had to Google it. I was using ChatGPT trying to figure out what the heck the M stood for, and I was like, "Oh frig, this guy's using freedom units."
Oh yeah, freedom units, baby. Yeah, I just got to be a little cryptic on Strava, just with these random codes, so that people reach out to me and are like, "What the heck is this?"
I knew it because I read the book, so I knew his plans were originally all in miles. And then I hit the comment section with the make Strava great again, so that was real nice.
Love it.
So for all the Boys in Motion 5K runners, you might be interested in what I'm doing for my training schedule because my main race is not a marathon this fall, it's actually the 5K. We're trying to break 20, so that would improve my PR by a minute because I've currently got a 20:38, I think, on Strava. That's what it says, anyways. So I'm running the 5K schedule that peaks out. It's the 30 to 40 mile, so 48 to 63 kilometer per week from Fitzinger as well. It's from their faster road racing 5K to half marathon book. And I found that plan through the calendar hack tool on org, which we shouted out last episode. And I'm just going to call it out one more time. That's defy.org. And they have a tool called Calendar Hack. You just go in there, you pick from a list of many, many different training plans. You've got couch to 5K, all the way to very, very advanced plans like what Andrew's doing, and you just put on the date that you're running, and then you can download that in kilometers or miles directly to your calendar. It's super simple, so if you're looking for a plan that's a little bit more structured, I encourage you to check that out. And I'm doing the 5K schedule 1, so that's the plan that I'm doing. If you want to follow along with that or try to like find something that's a little more fit for you, would suggest using that tool.
I might have to pivot from my Excel sheets, is what you're telling me. Is there any Ironman plans on this bad boy or what?
It's open source. I can submit a PR with your training plan if you can give me your training plan.
Big, I do have a couple I could pull up, that's for sure. It's all PDFs.
I mean, I can turn it into a JSON, lickety split.
I'm surprised Tyler even knows what those words mean. He actually knew what a JSON file was.
Nope, all I heard was
No,
lickety split. That's all I heard.
he's just frozen. Cannot compute.
All I heard was lickety split, and he was in.
All right. Well, I think that might wrap us up for today. I think Tyler's still with us there. I think he's still might trying to be figuring out what JSON means, but that's okay. But yeah, just wanted to thank everyone that made it this far for tuning in to this episode of the Boys in Motion podcast, and we hope you found some of our tips for your running form helpful, and hopefully you can integrate them and some of the cues that we talked about today.
If anyone knows what a JSON is, just put it up in the chat. Please help me out here. And I'll never forget. Don't forget. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. I always miss one. And Strava. And that's where you're going to get some nice info on the BIM 5K, I think. So don't forget, follow us for some good content and subscribe. Oh, that's the one, podcast that we're doing right now. Spotify, Apple Podcast.
That was better than most.
Exquisite.
Yes, and while we were wrapping things up, just remember we're not medical professionals, so the advice and tips that we're sharing are based on our own experiences, our research, but we do encourage you to always consult a medical professional, a healthcare provider, before making any significant changes to your exercise routine. So just keep that in mind with the content today.
And just before we leave you today, we just want to remind you to keep moving, stay motivated, and we'll see you next time on The Boys in Motion.
Boys in
Out.
motion out.